Hey, and welcome to Thursday Night Live. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise. And thank you all for tuning into the show today. It's going to be a great topic. Um, the topic tonight is how to communicate with God, your higher self, your guide, so that you can use that information to guide your life. And there are a lot of people that want to understand that want to know how to tap into their psychic abilities, communicate with God, communicate with their higher self. It doesn't really matter. They want to get information so that they don't do stupid stuff. I mean, unless you're a dumb girl and you get in relationships with like every crappy guy on the planet. But that's because you're not necessarily listening to yourself. But that's a different story. We'll come back to that. And I use those words interchangeably because I don't really know who is providing this information, offering this guidance and advice. So I just am just going to use different words to fill those in. But it seems like that's something that people really want to be able to access because it would just make life so much easier. And there are those people that say, oh, well, you have to develop your psychic abilities. You have to open up your chakras and do all of these things so that you can tap into it. But that's really not the case. The case is that we do it all the time. And for most people, we just don't listen. We don't pay attention to the guidance we're receiving, and we let it pass us by the wayside. And this show, one of the topics that we talk about all the time is mindfulness. And this is kind of a side benefit to being mindful. And it's being able to open up those communication channels. And it's not even open the communication channels. It is recognizing that the communication channel is there and that you're receiving it all the time if you happen to listen. So the other day I had a client who, it was actually kind of funny. She says, I'm so confused, but I want to leave my husband. And I'm like, well, it doesn't sound like you're confused. It sounds like you've already made the decision. You want to leave your husband. And it made me laugh because I got the impression from her that, it's time to end the marriage. It's time to leave your husband has been this broken record in her head for a really long time. But there were some situations, as I talked to her more, there were some situations that happened that she was done, and as I like to say, she was ready to put the period at the end of the sentence and move on. And I think I've mentioned this on the show before, that spirit nags. It will just bug you. If you ask a question, well, what should I be doing now? They'll tell you the same thing over and over and over again until you finally do it. In my own life, my own personal story, when I had finished at the Berkeley Psychic Institute, I was living in California. I moved to Washington. Obviously, that relationship ended. And so I was like, okay, so what am I going to work on now? And I got this message, well, you need to go back to school. So I got a hypnotherapy certification. I got my Reiki master thing. I took some other certification course. And every time I would do it, I would ask the question, so what am I going to do now? And I would get that same message. You need to go back to school. 3 years. And finally, I went back to school and got my naturopath degree. And when I finished that, like within a week, I was like, okay, so what am I going to do now? And the message was, you're going to get your PhD and write a book, which would have been book number 2. And it was like, okay, so I did that. And I will tell you, I have never, ever received that message again about needing to go back to school. Thank God. Thank God. Lots of other messages, not that one anymore. But that information comes through on different channels in different ways, depending on who you are and how you're designed and how you more readily receive information. It might be an image, it might be a feeling, it might be something that you hear, that soft voice inside, that for a lot of people, it's hard for them to discern and separate out, is that my ego voice talking inside, or is that my spirit voice talking inside? And then for some people, it might even come through in their dreams. I'm not a dreamer, but there are dream people, and that's how they receive their information. Um, and so I'll just share some stories, about me, because all I really have is me to talk about. Um, and this is talking about like how you receive information on visual levels. So let's back up one quick second. So if you ask the universe a question, the universe will always provide you with an answer. Might not be the answer you want, might not be the answer that you want to hear, but you will get an answer. And so one day my dishwasher had broke, and it was right before Christmas, and the repair guy was not going to be available until after New Year, which meant 2 weeks with a busted dishwasher, which wasn't that big of a deal, except there was about 4 inches of water in the bottom of the dishwasher. And so I sat on the floor with a coffee cup trying to scoop this water out, which was not being particularly successful. And so I asked, it's like, well, what can I use? What else can I use? And it was just kind of a random question. And in my mind's eye, I saw a turkey baster. And I was like, okay, I'm going to listen. Went and got the turkey baster. 20 minutes later, I was done. And so sometimes it could just be you have a question and you get this image, of the face of a friend, a place, whatever, that is the information. That is the response to the question. Sometimes it can be, that soft inner voice inside. Now, for me, that wasn't particularly my strongest, although it has gotten much better over the years. And I find it interesting because when I'm doing health related work with someone, I'll be like, okay, so, in my mind, I'll be like, okay, so what would be like a good supplement for them, or what would be a good therapy for them? And sometimes I get really weird stuff. My personal favorite is I was working with someone and she was having this kidney issue going on, kidney stones, I don't know, kidney issue. And I asked the question, so what could she use to deal with this kidney thing? And the word I heard was hydrangea. Now, I have hydrangeas growing in my backyard. They're very pretty flowers. I love them. But is there a therapeutic property for hydrangeas? Well, there just happens to be. And what they do is the exact thing that she needed for her kidneys. It was weird. But after that, I learned to listen and validate. So if I get some weird thing, I'll just get on my computer, and usually it's right, but I always validate. And sometimes the message can come through in a feeling, and feelings wise, there's yes is a yes and no is a no. And so yes is, do you want $1 million? Easy yes. If you ask, do you want to work on your taxes? For most people, that's an easy no. And when you get this, I'm not really sure, you're kind of wishy-washy, it's not feeling like solidly yes or solidly no, usually the answer is no. But it's kind of a feeling, it feels good, it feels right, versus like, Bert, don't want to do it. Okay, here's the story. So a lot of years ago at this point in time, there was an organization called Whole Life Expo that put on these giant wellness psychic events. I mean, they did one in Austin, Texas, and they had 22,000 people come through the door over the course of a weekend, something like that. It was a lot of people. And I had done the Austin one and didn't get out of my chair for 3 days. And they came back a few years later and we're going to do one in Dallas. And it didn't feel right. I thought Austin was a better location. I wasn't really sure why they wanted to do it in Dallas. I had been to a number their events. They've all been very successful for me. But I just wasn't getting the warm and fuzzy feeling about it. And I lived in Dallas, and I decided I was going to listen to myself, and I did not get a booth. I did not. I took that like, okay, Rita, you're getting a, and decided I'm really getting a no. This is a no. Honor the no. Don't talk yourself out of this no. 2 days before the event, the Twin Towers came down in New York, and all airline travel around the country was shut down. And so the speakers that the speakers that were supposed to appear at the Whole Life Expo were not able to come, and that show bombed out. They opened the door. They weren't charging admission. They were just trying to get people there. I'm going to assume that a number of their vendors didn't come. I know that when I had flown to one of their events in a different city, that I would fly, and so they probably weren't there either. So that was the last Whole Life Expo, which is really sad because it was a great event. And so when we're talking about this, hey, right here, Raylan. Having the cat in the house when I'm trying to do this show is just no bueno. Okay. Hey, puppy, right here, treat, right here. Right here. Thank you. Okay, so Raylan's going to come visit us. Say hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Okay, why don't you go in your chair? Go in your chair. Go on, right there. That's the boy. Anyway, so I'm always talking about mindfulness on the show. And so this is something to be mindful about. So if you're getting some kind of message that, if you ask a question and you get an answer to it, be mindful of that. If you wake up in the morning, and the example I use a lot is, you wake up in the morning and you get this thought, this very random thought that says, oh, well, maybe I should take a sweater today. But you don't, which is fine. However, in the afternoon, you end up going somewhere and it's freezing and you're thinking to yourself, God, I should have brought that sweater. God, I should have listened myself. And as you want to access, and I'll say develop this ability, it's okay that you didn't take the sweater. Don't beat yourself up because you didn't take the sweater, but be mindful that you got the message and you didn't listen to yourself, which is fine, and kind of not meditate, but become aware of how you receive that information, because that is that guidance coming to you, that over time you'll be able to listen to and acknowledge easier and easier. And then you get this random thing, hey, take a sweater, and you just take the sweater. You just do it. And just pay attention to the results. And in time, you'll start listening. You'll start paying attention, because you'll find out that what you're receiving will prove out to be true and right and correct for you and what you want to do. And what I found is that when you do, life goes easier. Things are better. It allows you to be more in alignment, more in the flow. And as I like to say, when those little miracles happen, please stop and say thank you and have gratitude. Okay, so that's our Soul Healer moment for today. But as always, this show is brought to you by soulhealer.com. That's soulhealer.com. If you would like to take the time to schedule a private consultation with me, I would love to talk to you. There are articles as well as all of my books on that site, which are also available on YouTube, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, et cetera, et cetera. If you're listening to this show in a recorded format, like on Spreaker or Spotify or Substack, and you want to join the live audience, The easiest way to do it is to go to my YouTube channel. That's Just Energy Radio on YouTube. 3 words, Just Energy Radio, at 7 p.m. Central, and click the live button, and it will open up the chat so that you can join us live. And this show is brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's appliedenergeticsinstitute.com, where you too can learn to be a medical intuitive counselor, or certified energy medicine practitioner. And I invite you to go to that site and download my free 50-page Jumpstart Your Intuition Guide to open the door for you to accessing that information for yourself. Okay. Well, there are like a gajillion comments in here, and I know that Marco is already here. Hi, Marco. So there's a lot of chat.